Hello Internet and welcome to Commander 101. In this episode I'll be rambling about commanders. I know, very shocking choice of topic in the series with this exact name, so let's be more specific. On today's docket we have a discussion about commander-centric decks. And before we actually start that, we need to talk about the types of commanders. There are probably a metric ton of classifications on the internet, some outlandish, some quite sensible, and a whole lot of just okay. Not sure on which part of the spectrum mine will end, but here we go. Personally, I tend to classify commanders in one of 5 categories. We have outlets, enablers, engines, combo pieces, and amplifiers. Of course, those are not mutually exclusive, so one commander can be in a few categories at once. And those more powerful usually are. So let's start with short explanations for each of those terms, before focusing on their impact on deck building. Outlets are probably the easiest one to explain. Their function is very linear, to use resources generated by the deck to our advantage or even possibly win on the spot. Most common version of this type of commander has some kind of ability that allows us to funnel mana into it for repeated effect, like Urza Lord High Artificer, Thrasios Triton Hero, or Kenrith Returned King. When left unchecked, they will provide enormous advantage. Or just outright win the game if you have unlimited mana to pump into them. Enablers are more tricky. They are responsible for a unique way of playing that is outside of normal scope of the gameplay. You can say they change the rules that everyone else needs to play around. Here we have examples in the form of Bello, Bard of the Brambles, Zur Eternal Schemer, and Vihan Goldwaker. They change the usually not interactive resource into an onboard threat that can push damage and or protect ourselves. Engines are in some way similar to outlets, but they tend to have passive effect that does not require additional resources like Eminence ability of Edgar Markov, or something that enhances our cards by giving them additional benefits like Azami Lady or Scrolls or Chatterfunk Squirrel General. Usually those types are not as scary on their own, but in current times it's hard to find a pure engine commander, at least the one that does not have some other bullshit on the side. Speaking of bullshit, we have combo pieces in the command zone. Those usually require just one additional card to turn into a game-winning combo. Tivit Seller of Secrets, Inala Archmage Ritualist, or Godo Bandit Warlords are probably the most well-known examples. That kind of commander is somewhat a double-edged sword. Sure, you always have half of your combo, but everyone can see that and in theory, at least, should know how to and when to interact with that obvious telegraphed win attempt. And finally, we have amplifiers. A type of commander that enhances our strategy to some kind of ungodly nonsense. Think Ishin to Heavens at Once, Yarok the Desecrated, or Veyran Voice of Duality. Same bullshit but 2 times more intense, or even more with the right setup. So, with the general classification out of the way, let's talk about their impact on actual deck building, with more examples of course. For this exercise I'll use the commanders that are quite often visible in my playgroup. Starting with Marneus Calgar. He is not only the outlet type commander but also a self-propelling engine. His first ability draws you a card on each instance of token creation. Each treasure, clue, food, top tier, etc. This by itself is a very powerful ability, since we have a lot of ways of creating some kind of token. Of course, being a card designed after 2020, he has additional lines of text. For 6 generic mana, he creates 2/2 Astartes Warrior tokens, which makes him a literal army in a can. Of course, this triggers his first ability, so not only do we get 2 bodies, but we also get a card. And with enough mana, we can just draw our whole deck in a turn. What could go wrong with that? So, how does our commander impact our deck building style? As usual with those high level concepts, the answer is it depends. We can go all in and focus on protecting our commander while creating tokens in a repeatable way. Or we can just dip in the use of him and build fully functioned token based deck that sometimes just happen to have a commander to draw more cards. There is also combo approach. If we have some way to generate an arbitrarily large amount of mana, we can just cast Marneus and spew out the whole legion to draw our deck and win this way. Of course, there's also a possibility of suiting him up with some equipment, like Excalibur, Sword of Eden, and just one-shotting a player with double strike. which can be quite hilarious. Your preferences will impact the approach, but choosing specific commanders should have some synergy with your game plan, at least when it comes to outlet types. The case is different in terms of enablers. Those are usually essential for chosen strategy. One of the most clear examples is Bello, part of the Brambles. Even his basic precon deck can just roll over some tables by sheer amount of stupid value. He breaks the balance of the game by allowing already powerful enchantments and artifacts to double up as an indestructible hasty creature, which also draws us cards on hit for some reason. For example, Warstorm Surge is balanced at 6 mana as a powerful effect, but when it also shoots for 4 damage on entering to any target, has haste, indestructible, and can attack as a 4/4 creature that draws us cards if not blocked, balance flies on the window very quickly. And that's only one example. As classification implies, Bello enables some serious bullshit that's impossible for regular commanders. And that impacts our deck building in much more serious way than in the case of outlet types. In this case, we want to have a lot of mana and powerful effects on enchantments and or artifacts. Other creatures are optional, since our prevention tool is an army of 4/4 indestructible creatures on the backswing. We're also dodging conventional mass removal, since during our turn almost everything important is indestructible, and outside of that is not a creature. Almost all enablers tend to have more personal protection in their deck lists. And that's a very good approach, since they are the crux of the strategy. Other parts of the deck depend on what kind of bullshit we want to enable, but usually it's much less powerful without the commander on the battlefield. Engine type commanders land somewhere in the middle of deck building importance, between outlets and enablers. It's nice to have them on the field to boost our deck functionality, but we don't need them on the field all the times. A good example of this type of commander is Pantlaza, Sun Favorite. Her effect is very simple. We get a stable value passively attached to other creatures that meet the requirements. But that's it. She isn't required to be ever present on the field. But it's a nice option to recover after board wipe and or other setback. This type of commander often is team focused, and in my opinion a good type to start your deck building journey. There's not much more to add here, just focus on the thing that gives you a boost from your commander and you should be okay. Commanders that are combo pieces are controversial. For some people they are the most honest ones. After all, you're telling everyone what's your easiest to achieve win condition and what they should be wary of. On the other hand, we have people that will hear combo and run to Reddit to write 10-page rant about the state of the game. Nevertheless, this type of commander tends to a very streamlined and focused deck building. You will want to protect your combo, and various ways to find the missing pieces. And while I don't have Godo, Bandit, Warlord in my playgroup, he's probably the purest form of combo piece commander, due to his interaction with Helm of the Host. The combo is very simple. Resolve Godo, fetch Helm of the Host on the battlefield with his ability, equip Helm to Godo, go to combat tab. This results with an infinite cycle of non-legendary hasty token copies of Godo that will grant an extra combat phase on their attack trigger, resulting with eventual win unless someone has an indestructible blockers. But since each token copy can also search for equipment on their enter trigger, having a Shadow Spear in the deck solves that problem quite nicely. Big upside of combo pieces as a commander is actually a quite big window to customize your deck. Of course, some slots are reserved for said combo, but the rest are free real estate for whatever you want to put in there, so you can fine-tune most of the decks to match your playgroup. And finally, we have Amplifiers. For example of this type, I've chosen Narset, Enlightened, Exile. She's a very explosive commander due to her board-wide buff of granting prowess to all creatures we control, including herself. She also provides us with card advantage / graveyard hate ability on attack trigger. This fuels her first ability since we're casting a non-creature spell. To utilize her to full extent, we need to employ specific strategies. We want to attack with wide board and we want ability to cast many spells each turn. So non-creature spells that provides tokens, haste enablers, low mana value cards, and so on. She will have a deck list that's full of self-replacing effects like GTEX and Probe or Expedite, and spells that create multiple creatures like Rally the Monastery and Raise the Alarm. Cheating on mana with Snap or Frantic Search will also be a huge boon to this strategy. But as her classification suggests, deck building should be focused on strategy that can work without her and not only with her on the field. She has no built-in protection and is very easy to remove, so should be deployed only when we already have a solid base of creatures and protection to maximize our value. Of course, you can always try to build her Voltron style and try to one-shot a player, but there's a big risk of catching a stray path to Exile or other cheap removal if you try. So let's try to summarize this with a little bit of visual aid. Outlets in general tend to have the least impact on your deck building. You choose them to match specific strategies and use resources that are generated during the game plan. Enablers, on the other hand, are on the opposite point of the scale. They provide a unique ability that enables specific strategy that is main focus during deck building. Engines land somewhere in the middle. They provide an advantage during gameplay, but require some specific restriction to fully utilize. Combo pieces are in two places at once. They force you to have a specific tools to actually function in their role, but can allow much freedom in filling the rest of the deck slots, allowing for much redundancy and or alternative ways to win. Amplifiers are somewhat deceptive. At first glance they should be on the high impact end of the scale, but if you actually think about it, they are more in the outlets territory. To properly utilize them we actually need a matching strategy, or rather we match them to utilize specific strategy even better. And that will be all for today. If you enjoyed this rambling, feel free to do all these YouTube algorithm things with liking, subscribing and so on, or just drop a comment below. See ya in the next one.